Bottle Rocket News. We are joined today by our friends at Eicoff. I'm so excited for today's show. For those that don't know, Eicoff is a company that sits within the WPP network and group of companies, which is also where Bottle Rocket sits, and is very, very focused on thinking about TV and audio and how to drive measurable sales through those mediums. So we're going to jump right in, and we're going to talk a little bit today about direct-to-consumer, acquisition of new customers, driving a better experience for brands and consumers through deeper rational and emotional connection. And I'm going to start with a question for Rob. Rob, tell me a little bit about how has the need for DTC, that direct-to-consumer, changed during COVID?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's two main components to that, really. One is the demand side, right? I mean, customer behavior has changed dramatically this year, as we all know, when people are shopping from home and people are relying on e-commerce, and so we need to find ways to reach them, right? To give them our message, sell them our product, and give them an easy way to purchase it. Obviously, a safe way to purchase it. So there's been a huge shift this year among consumers. We've heard from clients, we had a 3-year forecast for driving e-commerce as a share of our business, and we've hit that already this year, and I'm sure a lot of people have heard that as well. So that's the demand side. There's a need, right, from the consumer standpoint, and there's a need from an advertiser standpoint, in terms of, the flexibility that DTC advertising can provide and really the measurement that it can provide. It's more important than ever to track exactly how your campaigns are doing. How many sales you're driving each day, each week, and be able to react to that. And so, DTC advertising, whether it's DRTV or DR audio, provides that flexibility and that measurement. You put those together, and it's a win for marketers.
Thank you so much. And Delia, do you want to add anything to it, or at least give us the perspective of who do you think is who's responding well?
Mm-hmm. I think what I would add is just sort of elaborating on the measurement piece for a minute. And that's what I think is the most exciting in terms of DTC when we look at it for television. So even just in the last 12 months, measurement has really expanded and sort of exploded on television. So, traditionally, for DRTV, you would leverage a unique URL. You'd use an e-com site, potentially, a phone number for years, right? And nowadays we've got consumers that are texting commercials in order to get more information, that are immediately downloading an app to begin their research for a product or their evaluation for a product. So there's so many different ways to connect with a commercial and then ultimately measure the effectiveness of that investment. Because the reality is, in our world, our clients are judging what we've done this week. They're not in a position where they can wait 8 or 9 months out to see what the impact of that investment had on their business. They need to know, this coming Monday, what is everything that happened last week and what are we doing about it and what kind of optimization is there? So I think that measurement piece is really the big difference, for DTC clients. DTC clients, DTC brands, they are either so, new and nascent that they don't have the ability to wait an entire quarter to hit their goals. They have to do it immediately in order to get the next shot and get next month's budget in terms of any kind of marketing, really. And then I think you asked about, who's doing it well right now. I think, honestly, we've talked in the past about CPG brands, and I think they're the fascinating ones because they were really coming into this the underdogs, right? You've got very big legacy companies with a whole suite of brands that have relied on a warehouse model to brick and mortar stores, have had very little flexibility in terms of their marketing campaigns. And many of them now are starting to realize that they can leverage their marketing differently, that they can build out their own e-com, that they can leverage Amazon in a different way, that they can start to do continuity. So starting to do subscription-based, relationships with their consumers, that to me is brilliant. I mean, as a working mom, I don't want to have to go to the store every time we run out of paper towels. So if I can get that stuff shipped to my house every 4 weeks and I don't even realize I needed it, that's a win.
Tim, I see you nodding your head there. You're also feeling like the underdogs are coming back strong?
With respect to the CPG companies, I see them making a big push into the market through the direct-to-consumer offerings. I've been fortunate enough to get to work with a large D2C or a large brand that went D2C recently, and so I've taken some learnings, and I've also done a lot of research with certain companies, mainly Smile Direct and Tide Cleaners. They both have gone direct-to-consumer recently, and they both have wonderful experiences that I think highlight what is possible. And I think it's beyond just a new revenue stream from what I've seen. One thing that I've seen that's really interesting is the ability to access first-party data. You know, data became the world's most valuable resource in 2018 or 2019. And in a post-COVID-19 world, it's even more important to be able to know what your customers are doing, how to design products and services for the market as it's shifting. And what has been happening traditionally for a lot of CPG companies is they've been buying that data on the back end from partnerships. So they're not getting it in real time. They're not able to leverage it in a way where they can see forward or predict different things quick enough. So I think accessing that data, in addition to acting as a new revenue channel, really opens up a lot of doors for these companies that they didn't have before. And that door then acts as a pivot point for the rest of the organization to start growing around.
And you're seeing it everywhere. Just to jump on that, I mean, you're seeing it in, Bud Light's out there with DTC with a delivery program, auto, so Carvana, has seen growth, and you're seeing a lot more direct purchase automotive, right? So it worked for a lot of different categories that maybe wouldn't have considered it before, but now they need to. And again, you have the benefits, and then the data element, like Tim said, is just another huge bonus to be able to own that data and use it for remarketing and use it to improve your experience. So a lot of categories are winning and using it the right way.
The data piece is kind of interesting though, because it's really like, in our world in terms of consumer acquisition, it's where we start, but it's also what we're ultimately driving for the client, right? So like for us to do any kind of DTC consumer acquisition, we need to understand, who's your ultimate customer, who's has the strongest lifetime value, all of that stuff. And we need to be able to turn on a campaign that can track all of that in a really, really detailed way. And then ultimately feed that back to the brand so they can understand not only the customer segmentation, but incrementally, what's the volume that we're getting? What are the conversion rates? It's like the entire sales funnel. So typically in the world of television, that would be just awareness. We drove consideration in the market, but we have to be able to look all the way down the funnel. What's the conversion to lead? What's the conversion from lead to sale rate? What is that among different segments? And how do I go get more of those? And again, turn that around really quickly. So, the data piece, that's ultimately what it's all about. And specific for the last thing on CPG, that is the fascinating thing, because you talk to some of the CPG clients that are just starting to get into DTC, and they have no access to their consumers other than syndicated data. So I think they're probably the ones that are most excited about DTC, where I think, a year and a half ago, we all thought it was all about startups and, digitally native companies that have built e-commerce and fintech platforms. And now you realize, no, it's these much larger legacy companies that are so excited about building first party data for sure.
How much of, as we're talking, I'm thinking about the idea of all of the benefits of D2C advertising, as well as like all of the benefits of brands going D2C in terms of being able to fulfill, let their customers purchase and fulfill a product set from the brand. But I'm also wanting to understand a little bit around this idea of like, as organizations, we go in and we help our clients with really understanding the customer lifetime value. How much does that idea of the customer lifetime value then feed into the acquisition D2C, whether that is direct response television, DRTV, whether it's those sort of programs? How much of the program work is designed on really thinking through, well, if we're able to get this right customer, whether that's the mindset of the customer, the age of the customer, or however we're defining the persona of the customer. How much of that audit is done in the upfront when you're really thinking through the growth with clients?
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in there, and I'm sure Delia can chime in as well. I mean, it's all connected and it's very important, right? And so we take that into account, certainly in the planning process. What is the type of consumer we want to acquire? Who has the highest value? And we set up our campaigns to target them. But obviously, where things really happen is in flight as we're getting the data, and as we're tracking sales, and as we're tracking conversion, and we're continuing to track downstream conversion and understanding lifetime value. We can take that all the way back up to our schedules now, and we have a really good sense as we're in our flight, which stations, which programs, which day parts, even which medium are generating that customer that we want, and we're able to optimize and shift our budget there. So they're very connected. And that's another one of the great things about that data stream, is really just being able to use all those data points and apply that learning up the funnel, and ensure you're getting the right customer, you're talking to the right people. And obviously it also helps inform messaging too, which we really haven't talked about much, but different creative will generate a different quality, a different type of informed consumer that impacts that lifetime value as well.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to expand upon, was the creative piece, Rob. I just think, it's funny, in a world of data, I think we focus on what are the reports, what's the platform, what's the dashboard going to look like, all of the spreadsheet world, and in our world of television and creative, it's really fascinating how much you can use that data in creative. So we'll look at, when we're developing a message, whether it's a 10 or 15 second spot or a 2-minute spot, or even a 30-minute infomercial, if you can believe it, we'll look at a lot of data. We will look at customer segmentation from existing customers. We will look at different conversion rates down the funnel from different messages or different media. For many clients who still rely on phone within their sales, sales journey, a lot of really considered purchases, if you think about, financial services and insurance, will heavily rely on agents and phone calls to go through, here are the product offerings, here's what that's going to cost you and what the coverage is. We'll monitor phone calls and sit and listen to phone calls, because it's an incredible moment where you can hear exactly how your customer talks about your product, your competitor's product, the category as a whole. They use language that might be different than what you use in-house at a brand, that might be maybe more marketing speak and a little bit less in the voice of the consumer. So there's really great stuff that we can get from call monitoring, from digging into keyword searches and understand, again, the phraseology that consumers are using, put that into the commercial so that we just can get rid of as many barriers as possible to make sure that we connect with someone and get them to take action now. Because again, this is about acquiring the customer now. Get them to raise their hand, bring them into the funnel, and push them through as quickly as you can. Because the thing about a lead coming from TV is that it's very, very hot, because it's incredibly impulsive. It's different than someone, starting their search online. It's incredibly hot, but it's going to cool off really quickly. So you've got to make sure you're watching that conversion down the funnel in a different way, frankly.
Thank you. And one of the things that we, as an experienced consultancy, Tim and I are often on projects where it's very, very agile. So we're constantly reassessing and reprioritizing and changing based off of the real-time data. And it sounds very similar to your process as well, in terms of things can be in flight, and whether you're tweaking the audience or the creative, you're able to drive that pivot. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So we get data feeds in-house daily, whether it's from digital attribution, website traffic, app downloads, e-commerce, phone call centers. And we're looking at on a daily basis. So our whole team of buyers are, sitting down at their at-home desks these days every morning and looking at every single spot that aired yesterday for their clients, starting to identify those trends. What drove response, but the response didn't convert? Maybe there are spots that didn't drive as much response, but they converted a higher rate. So we'd actually like more of those and less of the former. And starting to spot those trends and make changes. And sometimes we'll be doing that to affect media that's running in 2 days. So it's almost like a trade desk. It's far more familiar to a traditional, SEM or digital manner of buying, and that you're optimizing all day, every day to look at, what's the data coming in, spot the trends, throw out the outliers, and ultimately just push as much volume, qualified volume as possible.
Great, thank you. So we've talked a little bit about, how the non-native brands are now doing D2C, both in terms of that D2C advertising piece as well as the fulfillment. What about the native brands themselves, right? These are the ones where we're always reading about, I don't know, pick your favorite. I mean, I have some friends. Casper, Alo Yoga is popular here in New York City. The Allbirds are the ones the finance guys are wearing. Like, who's doing D2C well from the native standpoint? And what do you think that they know that we need to learn from? Tim, maybe let's start with you on this one.
All right. So I've mentioned two different examples in my first answer here. One was Tide Cleaners and Smile Direct. Now, Tide Cleaners is obviously not one of the newer product-led brands. Now, Smile Direct, for me, would classify into that category. And so I use Smile Direct personally to do their Clear Retainers program to get my teeth a little straighter. And it was like a 120-day process after I got the retainers, and it was completely digital. I never spoke in person with anybody, but I was assigned a dentist. It was a certified dentist, but I chatted with them almost the entire time. I never actually had to get on a video call or anything like that. So whenever you sign up, the experience is such that you never have to interact with a human, but you're still getting the level of service and the information, and you feel, the convenience and the trust that you would by going into a physical experience. So I think what they have learned, the trick is how to provide an experience in a digital fashion while reducing costs majorly by offloading the amount of people that have to be there for human-to-human interaction.
Yeah. We're seeing that as well, that trend. We're seeing that, I think one piece that's disrupted is, of course, the synchronous versus the asynchronous. So you were texting versus always talking on the phone. So that allows that orthodontist to be able to scale and serve more people. I think another one in there is this idea of shifting the location, right? And we're seeing this a lot in healthcare now with the telehealth stuff, right? Where that orthodontist could be sitting in California and you're sitting in Dallas, Texas. And then another one in there around just leveraging all of the digital to make things work in an automated fashion. That theme runs, whether it's Smile Direct to so many other verticals as well. I'm thinking about mental health, behavioral health as one. We see it in HIMSS. We see it in, I was watching football yesterday. So like that trend is continuing. I know, Rob, Delia, you were about to jump in and I beat you to the punch. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say the experience, also builds value. So obviously there's obviously ways that you can cut costs to help profitability, and that's helped a lot of these companies. But they all have some kind of unique experience or unique benefit that creates a value that they're out, that they're able to focus on it and really push. And so, whether it's Allbirds or a client of ours, Cane 11 Socks, which is socks to fit your size for your feet, right? That's like a no-brainer, but it's never been done before, and so there's value there, right? And so they're owning that experience all the way through every touch point to the consumer, not leaving it up to like a sales clerk in a department store and being end up on the rack somewhere, right? So there's just so much that they own, and they surround the consumer, and there's a value there, right? So the consumer feels good about it and they want to come back. And so, obviously those are lessons I'm sure that the larger non-native DTC companies are certainly looking to follow.
What are some non-obvious things that you suggest some of our watchers or listeners think about to be successful in DTC?
Well, I can just jump it real quick and then I'll pass it on. I just think, I think the data piece maybe is not as obvious to some advertisers, and taking one step further, it's sharing the data with your partners. So again, it's different experience across different types of clients. I think the native DTC companies, they're way more familiar with their own data. It's easier for them to access, and they work much more collaboratively with their partners because they know what it takes to succeed. And then maybe some of the non-native companies, it's not so easy maybe to get a hold of their data, and they don't want to share it as much with their partners. But then that is actually a barrier to success, right? The more data we can get, the better we can measure our performance and the better we can optimize. And obviously the campaign does better. So, in my mind, it's, the importance of data and the openness to share it and collaborate with your partners.
I think that's definitely true. I would add maybe a less obvious thing would be that the creative takes a lot of thought. So I think oftentimes when you think of direct response creative, you think of a very rational push. It's a list of benefits. I've heard, new to DRTV brands say it's like a PowerPoint in video. And you can understand why people think that, but there really is a very smart structure that requires in order for that, for those pieces of information, for those product benefits, for those reasons to believe, if you will, the manner in which you share them to actually get the person to take action and do it immediately. Because again, we need you to take action in that moment or on that day, not 6 months from now when you're thinking about, buying something new. So I do think that a lot of times, especially when we work with digitally native brands, they might be startups, they might be e-com or fintech that have built their brand in search and social. They've done a lot of video and they've done it successfully in social platforms. When you're taking it to TV, it does require a little bit of a nuanced structure. You have to be very clear, but you also have to be persuasive. And so I think sometimes folks think I can take this 30-second that we cranked out for Facebook and put it on television and it's going to be successful. And sometimes takes a little bit more finesse than that. So that would be the thing I think that is surprising often to the digitally native folks that we talk to.
Great. No, that's a really great point. Thank you. Tim, anything you want to add? Otherwise, I got another direction I want to go, but please go ahead.
I do have one thing I want to add there. Two things I want to add on there from the learnings that I've seen in my experience supporting brands in this space, which one is if you are a non-native D2C company thinking about going D2C for the first time, I would spend a lot of time creating your change management plan and thinking about the resource that you want to underpin that new experience and that new product. Having a very solid product owner that has the ability to reach out to stakeholders who have the decision-making ability to get things done is imperative. So for example, if you are an organization set up for bulk delivery and you want to move into pick and pack, you better have somebody that knows how to make that operational change happen very fast. And then secondly, is the ongoing maintenance and what is required to not only build the application, but to grow it over the next 2, 3, 4 years. That is an entire different ball game that I think on the surface is not as obvious to many brands that are going D2C for the first time. Getting the experience out the front door is a feat in and of itself, but that is just the first step. After that, you're talking about constant campaigns, growing, improving the product through feature development. That's just the first step. So understanding that you not only need a team to get the first version out, but you need to have a plan for ongoing growth. Those are two things that I would really keep in mind.
I think that's great. I think the other thing that I would say is if you are a brand and you are considering going D2C and creating an experience where you could fulfill your brand products for a customer, where I have seen brands struggle is when they look at it and they're like, oh, I'm doing $1 billion on this brand, and next year I think I could do 10 million direct. The ROI is not there in the first year. And so you need to have a little bit of a longer time horizon. But I think what is immediate within that first 12 months of having the experience is the first party data, which is something we talked about at the top of the call. Especially if you're a CPG company and you're being essentially going through other parties to distribute your wares. But anyway, so one of the things that I find totally fascinating about Eicoff is the fact that not only is it possible to grow on linear and digital TV with Eicoff, but also on the audio side. So could we talk a little bit about that? Because of course, what we're seeing in the world right now is, as consumers, there's just been a plethora of streaming available to us, a plethora of podcasts now available to us. And it is essentially increasing the number of hours that brands have to reach consumers. And some consumers actually prefer the audio format. So tell us a little bit about, Delia, brands that you're working with that you think are doing a great job on the audio side of things.
Yeah, before I even jump into that, I would just agree that the fascinating thing as we look at viewership numbers, even those coming from Nielsen, is that the hours of consumption of media a day are going up every quarter. Forget COVID, even before COVID, we were engaging with media more each quarter. Now, those COVID numbers are then, exponentially higher because we're at home and we're not driving around and all that. But when you think about the access that you have to your consumers, you have more access to them than ever before. And the areas of growth are things like, you mentioned digital TV, or what we would call connected TV, digital video, some pieces of audio that are streaming based, and all of the time that we spend on our smartphones. All of that growth is coming in places where we can target in very dynamic ways with all of that data that we were talking about. So it's really it's a good time to be a marketer who wants to do some testing and get smart about using their own data. No matter how little you think you have, there are really cool things you can do with it. And in terms of audio, certainly audio still includes terrestrial AM, FM radio, and there are a lot of interesting ways to use, terrestrial radio, but it also includes, as you said, podcasts, streaming, when we think of, Pandora and Spotify. Those platforms, just as connected TV does, give us the opportunity to do some really dynamic targeting, and then measurement as well, because, I think folks tend to listen to those devices on a smartphone, on a walk, or, doing housework or something, where the response mechanism is in their hand as the same device, right, that they're using to listen. And so the ability to take people from your first message, where you've shared in a convincing and rational way your product benefit, and click right through to, bring them down funnel to lead or sale is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I would just add to that. We're in different times now, right? Obviously with COVID, but drive time isn't what it used to be, and people are using audio differently. And so there's different ways that we need to go out and reach people, and all this new content opportunities presents new opportunities to, as you mentioned, Rajesh, to reach people, and to get more precise with targeting, with all the targeting that can be done on the streaming side. So again, it's just more opportunities for marketers. And on your demo, it's a good way to reach certain folks, with a message. And to Delia's point, they have their device right there where they can respond. So again, the shorter we can make that path, the better.
Yeah, and it's amazing also to see some of the new tech coming out in terms of, even in my set-top box, which I got upgraded, and all the things I can do now that I wasn't able to do before. It is an exciting time to be a marketer, a responsible marketer, a growth-driven marketer. And so thank you so much for being on Bottle Rocket News. It's been such a pleasure to have you on. And thank you, Tim. Great to see you. Thank you to everyone who's joined us today.
Really fun. We'll be back.
Thank you.